My twin sister crashed my wedding, took my groom and left me broken. So I made sure their honeymoon ended in debt, lies, and public shame. I used to believe that the worst thing that could happen to someone was being left at the altar, until I realized that sometimes the most devastating betrayals become the greatest gifts life can give you. My name is Ariana Bennett, and I'm 29 years old. A year ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life would look like. Married to Nathan Grayson, living in our cozy suburban home, maybe starting a family within a few years. I had it all planned out, every detail carefully considered, every dream neatly organized. But life has a funny way of laughing at your plans, especially when the person you trust most decides to rewrite your entire story without telling you. Nathan and I had been together for 2 years when he proposed. It wasn't the most romantic proposal. He did it during halftime of a football game we were watching at his parents' house. But it felt right. He was steady, reliable, the kind of man who remembered to take out the trash and never forgot important dates. My friends called him husband material, and I thought I'd won the lottery finding someone so dependable at 27. The wedding planning was everything I'd dreamed of. We booked the historic Riverside Manor, sent out elegant ivory invitations, and I found the perfect dress, a flowing A-line with delicate lace sleeves that made me feel like a princess. Nathan seemed excited too, though he left most of the decisions to me, saying he just wanted me to be happy. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to how detached he seemed during those months. How his phone was always buzzing with messages he'd quickly dismiss as work stuff. There was one shadow hanging over our perfect day though, my twin sister Bianca. We'd been estranged for 5 years after she'd betrayed our family's trust one too many times. Bianca had always been the wild one, the twin who pushed boundaries while I colored inside the lines. She'd stolen money from our parents, lied about everything from her job to her relationships, and finally crossed the line when she tried to seduce my boyfriend in college right in front of me at a family barbecue. That was the last straw for our parents, and they'd made it clear she wasn't welcome at family events anymore. I'd sent her a wedding invitation anyway, some naive part of me hoping that maybe this milestone would be important enough for her to try to mend things. When she didn't respond, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because I wouldn't have to worry about what drama she might bring, and sadness because my twin sister wouldn't be there on the most important day of my life. The week before the wedding, Nathan started acting strange. He was working late every night, taking mysterious phone calls that he'd end abruptly when I walked into the room. And he seemed distracted even during our final wedding preparations. When I asked him about it, he'd kiss my forehead and say he was just stressed about some big project at the logistics company where he worked as a manager. "You know how it is, babe," he'd say, running his hands through his dark hair the way he always did when he was nervous. "Once the wedding's over, everything will calm down." I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Because when you love someone, you give them the benefit of the doubt even when your gut is screaming that something's wrong. The morning of our wedding dawned perfect. Sunny but not too hot, with just enough breeze to keep everyone comfortable. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by my bridesmaids, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. My maid of honor, Jessica, brought me coffee in bed, and we spent the morning laughing and getting our hair and makeup done. Everything felt magical, like a fairy tale coming to life. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock at Riverside Manor, with the reception immediately following in their grand ballroom. We'd invited 200 people, family, friends, colleagues, and neighbors who'd watched Nathan and me fall in love. As I walked down the aisle in my dream dress, holding my father's arm, I saw Nathan waiting for me at the altar in his perfectly fitted black tuxedo. He looked handsome but nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot the way he did when he was anxious. The officiant, Pastor Williams, began the ceremony with a warm welcome to our guests. Everything was going exactly as rehearsed until we reached the part where he asked if anyone had any objections to our union. It's usually just a formality. Nobody ever actually objects at weddings, right? That's when Nathan raised his hand. The church fell dead silent. I felt my heart stop beating for a moment as confusion washed over me. This wasn't part of the script. This wasn't supposed to happen. "I do," Nathan said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed sanctuary. "I object to this marriage." Pastor Williams looked as stunned as I felt. "I'm sorry, son, but you can't object to your own wedding." Nathan took a deep breath, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. a mixture of guilt and determination that made my blood run cold. "I can't marry Ariana," he announced to the entire congregation, "because I'm in love with someone else." The gasps from our guests were audible. I felt like I was watching this happen to someone else, like I was floating above my own body observing this nightmare unfold. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening to me, not on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. "Nathan, what are you doing?" I whispered. But he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking toward the back of the church. That's when I heard the click of heels on marble, and I turned to see a figure walking down the aisle toward us. At first my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. The woman had my face, my hair, my build, but she was wearing a red dress and a triumphant smile I recognized all too well. Bianca, my twin sister, walked down the aisle like she owned the place, her chin held high, her eyes locked on Nathan. When she reached the altar, Nathan stepped down and took her hand, right there in front of God and everybody. "I'm sorry, Ariana," Nathan said, finally looking at me. "But I can't deny what's in my heart anymore. Bianca and I have been together for 6 months. We're in love, and we're leaving together today." The church erupted in shocked murmurs and gasps. I stood there in my wedding dress, bouquets still in my trembling hands, trying to process what was happening. My sister, my twin sister, had not only shown up to my wedding uninvited, but she'd stolen my groom right at the altar. Bianca stepped forward, her red lips curved in that familiar smirk that used to drive me crazy when we were kids. "Sorry, sis," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But you know what they say, may the best woman win. How could you do this to me?" I managed to choke out, but Bianca just shrugged. "Nathan came to me, not the other way around," she lied smoothly. Apparently he realized he was settling for the wrong twin. Can you really blame him for choosing passion over predictability? Nathan had the decency to look ashamed, but he didn't contradict her. He didn't defend me. He just stood there holding my sister's hand while I fell apart in front of 200 people. My father stepped forward, his face red with rage. "Get out," he said quietly. "Both of you. Get out of here now before I do something I'll regret." Nathan and Bianca didn't need to be told twice. They turned and walked back down the aisle together, leaving me standing at the altar in ruins. The last thing I heard before they disappeared was Bianca's laughter echoing through the church. The aftermath was a blur of tears, shocked relatives, and the surreal experience of canceling a wedding reception while still wearing my wedding dress. My bridesmaids rallied around me, trying to shield me from the pitying looks and whispered conversations. My parents were devastated. Not just by Nathan's betrayal, but by Bianca's cruelty in choosing this moment, this day, to destroy everything. But the worst part came in the days and weeks that followed. Social media exploded with the story. Someone had filmed Nathan's announcement and Bianca's dramatic entrance, and it went viral within hours. Suddenly, I wasn't just a victim of betrayal, I was a cautionary tale, a meme, the girl who got left at the altar by her own sister. Some people were sympathetic, but others, particularly those who'd never liked me, or who'd always preferred Bianca's wild charisma to my quiet reliability, started suggesting that maybe I'd had it coming. Maybe I'd stolen Nathan from Bianca in the first place. Maybe this was just karma finally catching up with me. The narrative that emerged on social media was even worse, that I was the boring, controlling sister who'd trapped a man who really belonged with my more exciting twin. Bianca, meanwhile, was posting photos of herself and Nathan on exotic vacations, at fancy restaurants, living it up like they were celebrating their escape from the mundane life he would have had with me. 3 weeks after my wedding day, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't stay in this town where everyone knew my story, where I'd run into Nathan's friends and family, where every street corner held memories of a future that would never happen. I packed everything I owned into my car and drove west, with no destination in mind except away from here. I ended up in Portland, Oregon, a city where nobody knew my name or my story. I rented a tiny studio apartment and took a job at a local interior design firm, starting at the very bottom as an assistant despite having a degree in design and 3 years of experience at a firm back home. But I didn't care about starting over. I needed to rebuild myself from the ground up anyway. Those first few months were the hardest of my life. I spent most evenings alone in my apartment, crying over everything I'd lost, not just Nathan, but my sense of self, my faith and love, my relationship with my family who didn't know how to talk to me about what had happened. I felt broken in a way I'd never experienced before, like some essential part of me had been ripped away. But slowly, something began to change. Without the pressure of maintaining a relationship, planning a future with someone else, or living up to everyone's expectations of who I should be, I started discovering who I actually was. I threw myself into work with an intensity I'd never had before, staying late to study design trends, volunteering for projects nobody else wanted, and pushing myself to be better than I'd ever been. My boss, Carol, noticed my dedication and started giving me more responsibilities. Within 6 months, I was working directly with clients, and they loved my fresh approach to design. I had a way of listening to what people really wanted, not just what they said they wanted, and creating spaces that felt authentically theirs. "You have a gift," Carol told me one day after a particularly successful client presentation. "You understand that design isn't just about making things look pretty. It's about creating environments that make people feel like the best version of themselves." I started freelancing on weekends, taking on small projects for friends of friends. Word spread quickly about this new designer who could transform spaces in ways that felt both sophisticated and livable. Within a year, I had more work than I could handle as a side business. That's when I made another life-changing decision. I was going to start my own design firm. I used every penny of my savings, took out a small business loan, and launched Ariana Bennett Design from my studio apartment. My first real client was a young couple who wanted to renovate their Victorian home, and I poured everything I had into that project. When they posted before and after photos on social media, my phone started ringing non-stop. The business grew faster than I'd ever imagined possible. Within 18 months, I'd moved into a proper office space, hired 2 assistants, and was booked solid for the next 6 months. My designs were being featured in local magazines, and I'd attracted some high-profile clients who were willing to pay premium prices for my work. The best part wasn't the money or the recognition, though. It was the feeling of building something that was entirely mine. Every decision, every creative choice, every business strategy was mine to make. I'd discovered a strength I never knew I had, a confidence that came from surviving the worst thing I thought could happen to me and emerging not just intact, but better than before. I was working late in my office on a Thursday evening, putting the finishing touches on a proposal for a luxury condo renovation, when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was nearly 9 o'clock, and the number wasn't one I recognized. But something made me pick up. "Hello, Ariana. This is Margaret Grayson, Nathan's mother." My blood turned to ice. I hadn't spoken to anyone from Nathan's family since the wedding disaster, and hearing his mother's voice brought back a flood of memories I'd worked hard to bury. "Mrs. Grayson," I said carefully, "I'm surprised to hear from you." "I know this is unexpected," she said, and I could hear something strange in her voice, a mixture of embarrassment and desperation. "But I need to tell you something, and I think you deserve to hear it from family, rather than finding out some other way." "Okay," I said, bracing myself for whatever bombshell was coming. "Nathan's been robbed," she said bluntly. Bianca cleaned out their joint bank account, sold everything valuable in their apartment, and disappeared 3 days ago. She left him with nothing. No money, no furniture, and about $30,000 in credit card debt that she apparently ran up without telling him. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what she was telling me. "There's more," Mrs. Grayson continued. "The police say she's done this before, to at least 3 other men in different states over the past 5 years. She had fake identification, false references, the whole thing. Nathan wasn't her first victim, and he probably won't be her last." The irony was almost too much to handle. The woman who destroyed my wedding day, who'd stolen my fiancé and paraded their love all over social media, had turned out to be nothing more than a con artist. And Nathan, the man who'd humiliated me in front of 200 people for true love, had been played just as badly as I had. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because Nathan's been asking about you," she admitted. "He's devastated, Ariana. He realizes now that he made the biggest mistake of his life. He wants to apologize, to try to make things right. He's hoping—" She paused, and I could hear the hesitation in her voice. "He's hoping you might be willing to give him another chance." The laugh that escaped me was sharp and bitter. "Another chance." "I know it sounds crazy," Mrs. Grayson said quickly, "but he's learned his lesson. He knows what real love is now, and he knows he had it with you. He's grown up, Ariana. This experience has changed him." "Mrs. Grayson," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me, "I appreciate you calling to let me know what happened. But Nathan made his choice 18 months ago. He chose Bianca over me, in front of everyone we knew, on what was supposed to be our wedding day. The fact that she turned out to be a criminal doesn't change that. But surely you can understand that he was manipulated. No, I interrupted. He was an adult who made an adult decision. The consequences of that decision are his to live with, not mine to fix. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. He's lost everything, Ariana. His job, his apartment, his savings. He's staying with us now, trying to figure out how to rebuild his life. He could really use a friend. Then I suggest he find one, I said. I'm not available for that role anymore. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring out at the Portland skyline. Part of me felt vindicated. The universe had served up some poetic justice, and Bianca had gotten exactly what she deserved. But mostly, I felt nothing. The man who'd once been the center of my world, whose betrayal had nearly destroyed me, was now just a cautionary tale in someone else's story. My phone rang again an hour later. This time, it was Nathan himself. Ariana, he said, and his voice sounded different. Smaller, more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. Please don't hang up. I know I don't deserve to talk to you, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I'm listening, I said, curious to hear what he had to say for himself. I was an idiot, he began, the biggest idiot in the history of the world. Bianca came to me 6 months before our wedding, and she was so exciting, so different from what I was used to. She made me feel like I was living in a movie instead of real life. I thought I was in love, but I realize now I was just infatuated with the drama, with feeling wanted by someone who seemed so unattainable. And you thought the appropriate response was to humiliate me at our wedding? I know, he said miserably. I know how awful that was. I was a coward, Ariana. I should have talked to you privately, should have ended our engagement like a decent human being. Instead, I let Bianca convince me that making a grand gesture would be romantic, that it would prove how much I loved her. How did that work out for you? I asked dryly. He was quiet for a moment. She played me, Ariana. Played me like a fiddle. The whole time we were together, she was planning to take everything and run. The police think she targeted me specifically because she knew I had savings and a stable job. She probably researched our whole family before she ever contacted me. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. Nobody deserves to be manipulated and robbed. I miss you, he said suddenly. I miss us. I miss the life we were building together. These past 18 months have been hell, and not just because of what Bianca did. I've missed my best friend, the person who knew me better than anyone. Nathan, I said gently. That person doesn't exist anymore. What do you mean? I mean the woman you knew, the woman you were going to marry, she's gone. What happened at our wedding didn't just end our relationship, it ended that version of me. I'm not the same person who would have been content to live a quiet, predictable life in our hometown. I'm not the same person who would have put your needs and comfort ahead of my own dreams and ambitions. But that's good, he said eagerly. You sound stronger, more confident. I always knew you had it in you to be amazing. Then why did you leave me for someone else? He didn't have an answer for that because there wasn't a good one. Look, I continued, I'm glad you called. I'm glad you apologized. But this isn't a romantic comedy where the guy realizes his mistake and wins back the girl with a heartfelt speech. This is real life, and real life has consequences. So there's no chance for us? He asked, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. No possibility that we could try again? I thought about the woman I'd been 18 months ago. Insecure, people-pleasing, so afraid of being alone that I would have settled for a man who wasn't sure he wanted me. Then I thought about the woman I was now. Successful, independent, confident in my own worth. Nathan, I said, I want you to do something for me. Anything. I want you to pull up my company's website. Ariana Bennett Design. There was a pause while he presumably looked it up. Okay, I'm looking at it. Scroll through the portfolio. Look at the testimonials, read about my awards and the magazine features. Another pause. Ariana, this is incredible. You built all this? I did, after you left me at the altar. After I lost everything I thought I wanted. I discovered what I was actually capable of. I found out who I really was when I wasn't trying to be the perfect girlfriend, the perfect fiancée, the perfect wife-to-be. I'm so proud of you, he said softly. Here's the thing, Nathan. The woman who built this business, who created this life, she would never, ever settle for a man who wasn't sure she was enough. She would never waste her time trying to convince someone to love her, and she would definitely never trust her heart to someone who'd already broken it once. But I know now. No, I interrupted. You know now that Bianca wasn't who you thought she was. But that doesn't mean you know who I am, or what I'm worth, or what I deserve. You only want me back because your other choice turned out to be a disaster. That's not true, he protested. But we both knew it was. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. I forgive you for leaving me, for humiliating me, for breaking my heart. But forgiveness doesn't mean giving you another chance to do it again. Ariana, I have to go, I said. Take care of yourself, Nathan. I genuinely hope you figure out how to rebuild your life and find happiness. But you're going to have to do it without me. I hung up the phone and turned back to my computer, where the proposal I'd been working on was still open on the screen. It was for a penthouse renovation, my biggest project yet, worth more than I used to make in an entire year. The client wanted something bold but elegant, sophisticated but warm. In other words, exactly the kind of challenge I lived for now. As I worked on the design concepts, I thought about the conversation I'd just had. A year ago, hell, even 6 months ago, I might have been tempted by Nathan's apology. The old Ariana might have seen his downfall as an opportunity to be needed again, to rescue someone and earn their gratitude and love. But the woman I'd become didn't need to be needed. She didn't need to be anyone's savior or consolation prize. She had built something beautiful and valuable with her own hands, her own mind, her own determination. She had learned that being alone was infinitely better than being with someone who didn't appreciate her worth. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I thought it might be Nathan trying another approach, but it was actually my assistant reminding me about a client meeting the next morning. A tech executive who wanted me to design his new home office. Another exciting project that would challenge me creatively and professionally. I smiled as I saved my work and started gathering my things. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new challenges, new chances to create something amazing. And I would face it all as myself. Not as someone's girlfriend or fiancée or consolation prize, but as Ariana Bennett, successful entrepreneur and badass interior designer. As I locked up my office and headed home to my beautiful apartment, which I'd designed myself naturally, I realized something profound had happened during that phone call. The last vestiges of pain from my wedding day disaster had finally disappeared. Nathan's betrayal, which had once felt like the end of my world, now felt like the beginning of everything good in my life. If he hadn't left me at the altar, I never would have moved to Portland. I never would have discovered my true potential as a designer. I never would have learned that I was capable of building an amazing life entirely on my own terms. In a weird way, Nathan Grayson had given me the greatest gift anyone had ever given me. He'd forced me to become the woman I was always meant to be. The next morning, I woke up early and treated myself to coffee from my favorite cafe before heading to the office. As I walked down the street in my perfectly tailored blazer and designer heels, passing the storefront that would soon house the expanded version of my design studio, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Not for the pain, not for the humiliation, but for the strength I'd discovered on the other side of it. For the life I'd built that was entirely my own. For the woman I'd become who would never again settle for anyone who wasn't absolutely certain she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. My phone buzzed with one final text from Nathan. I understand why you can't forgive me, but I want you to know that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. I typed back a single sentence. Thank you for making it possible for me to find my real life. Then I blocked his number, dropped my phone back in my purse, and walked into my future with my head held high. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that ever could have happened. Sometimes being left behind is actually being set free. And sometimes the person who breaks your heart is really just clearing the way for you to discover that you never needed fixing in the first place. I was Ariana Bennett. And I was exactly where I belonged.